On today's podcast, we had a beautiful human being, Charles Eisenstein. He's the author of several books. One of my favorites, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. How's that for a title of a book? And I'm also really excited because he's going to be a speaker at the New Human Regeneration, October 4th to 6th, 2024, here in Enderby, BC. And it was such a lovely time to connect with Charles today on the podcast. And we share a little bit of personal elements, personal stories. We dive into some of the bigger picture aspects as well. And a little bit about Charles. Before we started recording, I asked him if he had any thoughts, any requests, any things that he needed. And he just said that he wanted it to be a sincere conversation. I think it was just that. Charles is a very down-to-earth, authentic, heart-centered human being. He's brilliant as well, and I was really honored to have him on the podcast today, and I can't wait to work with him in person at our event coming up, and I hope you all enjoy the episode.
Like it's always, but maybe all of these were forebodings of something that actually is coming, whether it's coming or not. Even the prospect of it, it shifts me into a different perspective on life. It's like, the shit's getting real now, and it's time to take it seriously and time to really step into my purpose. Like I like to say, the rehearsal is over and it's time to get real. And maybe it was always time to get real.
Yeah, just so honored and grateful. I may have shared this before when we chatted. I've been a big fan of yours for a number of years, and the books and publications and blogs and things that you do inspire me to continue to do the work that I'm doing, and both in the clinic and outside the clinic. And kind of what brought us together is the event we're planning in October this year, and you've graciously said yes to come and join us. And so thank you, first of all. And huge gratitude for all the work that you are doing in the world, which is, I think, what has brought this about. And I feel like in BC, when we see you in October in person, there's a lot of energy that's been building here, and it feels really supportive for all of us, despite so many elements going on in the world. And I feel like our conversation is maybe going to traverse the micro and the macro a little bit, and happy to kind of dive into all kinds of places. So anyway, just wanted to really welcome you.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that.
So maybe I'll just share and we'll see where it goes. But I remember I was probably in the first few pages of your book, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. And I had tears just start to show up and flow down my face, and I wasn't really sure why. However, I think it was a combination of the words in your story and what you shared. Even just right off the bat, there was some kind of connection or kindred spirit, I think, energy that I found, because I feel like quite an unlikely candidate to be on this podcast interviewing you and even doing the things that I am doing in the world right now. And just hearing a little bit of your story right off the bat, it pulled something in me, and that was well before we got to speak in person, over technology anyway. And so I'm curious, what were you feeling as you began that book? And maybe this goes back quite a ways now, but I'm curious of what chapter were you in your life when that really started to show up? Because I know it was also built on many years of being able to build that story of lived experience. But when you were actually writing it, what was happening?
Well, I was, let's see, Stella was pregnant with Carrie, and my life had, taken a new turn, both because of that, but also because, I had been in poverty and obscurity pretty much up until 2010. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't sudden, but I started to get invited to speak places, and by 2013, when I wrote this book, I could go anywhere in the world and speak anywhere, and I was getting invited all over the place, and I hadn't really done anything different than I'd always done. it made me appreciate how much of our lives is a product of, call it fate, fortune, destiny. Because if it weren't for a few lucky breaks, then, maybe I would have still been bankrupt and obscure, So I was feeling a lot of gratitude in those times for things that happened beyond my artifice, that were connecting the gifts that I had with the needs that I saw in the world for those gifts, for the information that I have access to.
Yeah.
And I guess that, like sometimes in life you're in a good place, and maybe that helped to connect me to the part of me that does know that a more beautiful world is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. And all these things are arising as you're sharing those things. When I even reflect on my own life of the different experiences or sort of twists and turns that then help prepare and build capacity for just showing up in a new way all the time. And this always brings up for me, like, mentors or chance encounters with really unique people, or, something is said along the way. And I'm curious if anything stands out in the massive Rolodex of all your human experiences anyway, of, something that maybe shifted you to the left when you thought for sure you're going to go to the right, or if there was, maybe any one sentence or phrase that somebody said to you that maybe changed the course of direction in some way, or I guess maybe just opened up the path more. Not that it wasn't the path you're on.
A lot of those experiences didn't happen in that particular phase. They happened many years before and didn't really affect me that much at the time, but they were like programs that were implanted in me that sprang into activation when a certain keyword, a certain condition was met. These dormant programs. Mm-hmm. And they, like, a lot of them very, very mundane experiences of, like, I remember there was my motorcycle mechanic in Taiwan. He was so kind, and like he kept like doing stuff for free for me, and I would try to bring him other business, but if I brought him any other business, because he also sold used motorcycles, if I brought him any other business, he would end up just being like really generous to that person too. So like anything that I tried to give to him or do for him would backfire, He was just like kind of an angel inserted into my experience in the form of a motorcycle mechanic, in this motorcycle shop outside of Taipei. But one day I was getting my motorcycle fixed, and this really belligerent drunk like comes by and starts making trouble, and wants to pick a fight with, because you see these motorcycle stores, they're not mostly indoors. They're like, they have like a storefront, but then they also have like, they're all over the sidewalk, and all over the street. Like it's not, it's a bit of a, at least back then, it was a bit of a third world vibe. Mm-hmm. So this belligerent drunk comes and he starts to make trouble and stuff. And the owner of the shop comes out as if this guy was his best friend, as if he was delighted to see him, and he like his energy completely changed the situation. He pats him on the back, and the drunk like walks off like the happiest guy in the world, and because there was part of me that was like, oh, fight, they're going to do something about this guy, but no. Nothing of the kind. I saw, and that it implanted in me an understanding of what power actually is, the kind of power that can achieve things that force cannot achieve. Mm-hmm. And that theme is woven into the book, I believe, that the changes that we want to see on this earth far exceed our capacity to make those changes happen. If we conceive of ourselves as the originators of change, and nothing is going to change unless we make it change, then the situation is hopeless.
Yeah.
And that is why a lot of people fall into despair. But when we understand that we can tap into powers and processes that are much bigger than ourselves, then there is hope again. And it involves, not overcoming the power elite at their own game, not beating them in their own methods, but in catalyzing a change of heart, like the motorcycle mechanic did to the belligerent drunk. He didn't beat him up, he didn't humiliate him. There was no victory where I'm the winner, you're the loser. And you have to, I think that generally we have to let go of that satisfaction of being vindicated, of the other guy getting what he deserves, of just punishment being delivered, we have to let go of that if we're going to actually heal this world.
Well, it's beautifully spoken. And I have this experience, and I had it yesterday in the clinic because I still work with people one-on-one. And what I generally get to see is sometimes, cases come in where they do feel quite hopeless because they've seen so many practitioners or doctors, and for whatever reason, they haven't been able to heal properly, or they're not feeling healthy and well. And I can see it in their energy, and I can see it in their eyes. And, we start a conversation, and just from a conversation of me sharing that there is another way, or there could actually be some solutions and things that just haven't been illuminated yet, then by the end of the session, even if I haven't done any treatment yet, they get to the front desk and they're like a different human being, and they have a smile and their eyes are lit up again, just because they know that there's something possible that they didn't know was possible before. And a memory's coming to me. When I was 18, I worked on a dairy farm down the road. And I grew up in rural, small community, and worked on people's farms. And the guy that I worked with, his name is Peter, great human being. And me being, I think I was 17 at the time, I didn't know anything about the world. And he did, though. He had lived a lot of different expressions in his life. And one day he shared, hey, I heard about this little girl. I think she was maybe 7 at the time. And I don't know, he might have been in his 40s or something by then, late 40s. And he said, it sounds like she needs a new kidney, or she's going to die. And I think I'm going to go get checked out. And I remember thinking he didn't know her personally. And so he went and got checked out and went through the massive amount of testing and questioning and everything else. And it turns out he was a match. And so he decided he was going to go through with it. And the people that questioned him and the whole intake process, they grilled him on everything in life because they couldn't really understand why he was doing it, or was he getting paid? What was going on in the background? He was a farmer and he was just doing this, that they couldn't imagine that maybe this random person who heard about it would step in like that. And he did. And I helped run the farm when he went to go do that. And that example installed in me a similar way, I think, to your motorcycle mechanic, that there is so much goodness in people in different ways that I got to see in a farm dairy, barn taking shape, and my own mind not being able to understand at the time, why would he do that? And he's like, well, I have 2 kidneys, why does she need to die? And so he did it. And he came back after the surgery, and he was in the milk pit 3 days later with this incision from his belly to his back around the side. And he's like, I can't stay inside anymore. I don't like the pain meds. So I'm like, so you're telling me you're not on any medication? He's like, yeah, they mess with my mind. I just don't like it. And I'm like, you need to go lay down. And he's almost passing out. He's white, but he's that type of person. And I remember just staring at him thinking, that is something really special. And that girl went on and survived. And him and I haven't talked about it for a while, but that changed something in me that maybe I didn't even realize until this moment, of those moments from our past, that something happens. And then I think maybe even subconsciously, I've been like passing that forward from his example in my own way in the clinic, and doing treatments, and done a lot of pro bono treatments over the years. And it's been really fascinating. And
Yes.
so,
Yeah. So events like that, they instill in us a new data point about what a human being is, what human nature is. Because, living in the kind of economy that we have, in the world that we have, doesn't really paint a very pretty picture of human beings. It looks like everybody's in it for themselves. Everybody's trying to get the best deal. It all comes down to the money. People will betray each other, stab each other in the back, treat each other as just consumers, just objects, instruments of their own gain, or that they just don't care about others, that people are heartless. That is, or just indifferent. That's what we see all the time. And that's what tells us what a human being is. But when you have that kind of experience enter your field, then you know that there's something else. You know that the appearance that society gives of the human condition is deceptive.
yes.
And so that part of you that does not feel at home in this kind of society has an ally, that has a lifeline. People who come in with these noble impulses and act on them, they're doing a lot more than helping that one girl with the kidney. They're creating a thread of connection to the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, to an alternative future from the one that we seem to be careening towards. And they're generating, in the book, I talk a lot about morphic resonance, the idea of a morphogenetic field, that the idea that an action like that creates a field of change that, in mysterious or non-mysterious ways, promotes that same kind of change elsewhere. So this generosity to share my kidney with somebody, maybe across the world, somebody else does the same thing, because he's kind of shifted everybody around him into a reality in which that is what human beings do.
Yeah.
And so this is, looking at the global situation now, the wars that are going on, the totalitarian trends, the ecological tipping points. I mean, all of the things that human beings are doing to each other and to nature, they seem unstoppable. And they seem that if they're going to stop, it depends on the whims of people who have power.
Yeah.
So we think, and who has power? Well, it's, whoever, Joe Biden, or Elon Musk, or Jeff Bezos, or Vladimir Putin. These are the ones with power. And a farmer in British Columbia, he doesn't have power, does he? A daycare worker in Iowa, she doesn't have power. A motorcycle mechanic in Taiwan, he has no power, does he? But that view that those are the people with no power, that's kind of part of the whole mindset of power, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like that says that the world is a mechanism operating by force. But we know better on some level. We know that, like, what that farmer did was important for the future. Mm-hmm. And when we face those moments in our lives where it seems not to matter, it seems it won't benefit me, it seems like no one's watching, I won't get thanked or celebrated, it won't go viral, it won't inspire others, It's just between me and you in this moment, an act of kindness, an act of patience. It seems, the mind says it's not important, but on a feeling level, we know that this is really important. It's really important that I, spend time with my mother as she's dying. It's really important. We know it. Like that, that's what we have to trust more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and this sort of is a question I've been contemplating in some way, and, moving into doing bigger events and speaking and traveling and things, which feels really good in my heart. And at the same time, because I'm holding a lot of balls in the air right now, and I'm in the clinic and still working one-on-one with people and feeling, I feel like I'm transforming, and I may be moving away from that. And I'm here to make an impact. And that's this like desire and intention that I have, which is what's, I think, allowed things to come through me. And this is what I've been wondering. Is it more impactful to be in a room of, a few hundred people, or the 8-year-old boy that I saw yesterday in the clinic, who has a lot going on in his system? Like, I know that I can help him. And when I look him in the eyes and he's sitting there and, we're in a treatment session, I can tell that he knows that I am there to help him in whatever way that I can in my own humanness. That is maybe as or just as impactful as helping a whole room shift in some way, even though maybe a full room of people can amplify something. But I don't have the answers to that, but I've been contemplating it, and I'm doing both so far.
Yep.
And just trying to listen to that impulse, or when the signs show up to turn left or turn right and carry forward in some way. But the feeling of looking somebody in the eye in that way, where there's that unspoken morphic resonance field that is like so palpable that it's like something's happening there that I'm continually learning more about.
Right. Yeah. I don't think that we can calculate how to have the best impact in the world. You could, I've had, as a public speaker, I've spoken to audiences of, a couple thousand, and I've spoken to audiences of 5. And I really don't know, maybe the audience of 5 was more impactful because maybe something happened in that intimacy that would not have happened in a bigger group. And maybe it's like, these implants, these programs that I was speaking about earlier. Maybe I implant something like that comes alive in that person's life 30 years later, or maybe gets passed on, changes something that they do as a parent, and then it blossoms in their child's life 50 years later. And there's no one to attribute it to what I said in that moment. But, even if you believe that the fate of the world depends on the whims of a handful of people in power, you still have to ask, where do their choices come from? They come from the totality of the influences on them. And so maybe the person who saved the world, you could say it was the Soviet submarine commander who defied orders and didn't launch his nuclear missiles. That happened. It was a faulty communication. But they didn't know, and they received the order to fire their missiles. And he didn't do it. Did he save the world? But why? Why did he make that choice? Maybe it was the love that his babysitter gave him. Or maybe he had a really good friend that affirmed to him the beauty of life. We don't know. All we can do is respond to the situations that are given to us. And to some extent, we can choose those situations, but those choices are also a response to the situations that are given to us.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we navigate those choices? Not by calculation.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that we ignore the calculations. It's not that we're oblivious to oh, this could reach a big audience, but we don't let that be what decides. You take the information in, but you still let the heart decide.
Yeah.
And sometimes the decision of the heart will not make sense.
I've definitely had that experience many times. Oh my goodness. And I'm curious if that's been your experience. It sounds like maybe it is, but even starting to do bigger events years back, I started having visions just when I was walking or in the forest or nature or meditation or something of me being on stage in front of thousands of people. And it terrified me completely. And I thought maybe I was having somebody else's vision, and I would actively push it away. And I kind of tried to ignore it. And then different things started orchestrating themselves in life that eventually I couldn't ignore it anymore. And, the fears or insecurities or inadequacies that can be prevalent, or my own self-judgment of who am I to speak about anything from any vantage point. Yet this vision and this energy seems like it's like pulling me down the river and in a beautiful way. And then things just keep opening. And I eventually, I guess in some way, like surrendered to that or accepted that. And then trying to distinguish too, like the inspired action and questioning myself is, where is this coming from? And ultimately knowing a lot of it is for me, it is for my healing in some way. And it's not just that, and that there's something greater happening around me. And I think even orchestrating, connecting with you, that I don't understand how all these things come together, and there's the logical sequence that I can trace, but there's much more going on there. And I feel like, especially at this time, there's a shift in energy. There's a shift in all the patients that I see. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of unknown or maybe confusion, and they're seeing it in their physicality and their bodies, and things are changing really rapidly. And it feels like we're in sort of a rapid evolutionary phase that maybe hasn't been felt in this way before, mm-hmm. but I'm only going by my own view into the world and my perspective. But I do get a unique perspective because I see patients one-on-one, but then I can see the parallel to the greater views of what's happening in the world, and that there's like something afoot in a really big way that maybe I'm just more aware of now, but there is something.
Yeah. It seems that way, doesn't it? And I'm a little cautious because people have been saying that for a long time. Okay, now we're entering a special time in history. But it does seem like, and again, maybe it's just where I'm sitting, but it seems like a lot of people in my field are going through like really intense initiations. And some of them aren't making it. Some beautiful people in our field have passed away.
Yeah.
They've gotten turbo cancers. They've gotten like this one guy, from diagnosis to death was 6 weeks, and he was a beautiful guy, owned a yoga studio. I mean, someone here too in Rhode Island, same thing. And people who aren't passing away, they're just going through crunch time, where people are really close to me. And I don't know, like, if the excess mortality statistics bear this out. Like, is this actually an objective phenomenon? But it seems like something's really happening. And not just for humans, but for the planet too. I've been recently looking into this this pretty sharp increase in the number of magnitude 4 or greater earthquakes around the world in the last 10 or 15 years, the number of deep tremors, earthquakes that happen hundreds of kilometers beneath the surface, big storms, things like that, volcanic activity, like lots and lots of tremors happening around these supervolcanoes, where it seems like Earth could be entering a tumultuous time. And then, of course, on the political level, too, we have the feeling that things are kind of going off the rails and anything could happen. And, I don't want to, again, like, I've been hearing this my whole life, the harmonic convergence, everything's going to change, Y2K, peak oil, 2012. Like it's always there, but maybe all of these were forebodings of something that actually is coming.
Yeah.
So if I guess whether it's coming or not, even the prospect of it shifts me into a different perspective on life. It's like, the shit's getting real now, and it's time to take it seriously and time to really step into my purpose. And like I like to say, the rehearsal is over and it's time to get real. And maybe it was always time to get real, but I guess the pretense that things are going to be okay is becoming impossible to uphold for more and more people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think based on what I get to experience with working with so many patients, the either metaphorical or direct elements that people are experiencing when they come to see me, it's like earthquakes are happening in their bodies and in their lives. And people, in some cases, neurologically, they are actually tremoring, just like the earth from deep inside. And so the longer I practice, the more I'm observing things in the world, and I observe nature. Why do the birds migrate a month early sometimes? Because they know a hurricane is coming months later. And it's through the morphic resonance that I believe they know that information. It's not like somebody sends them a news clip like, hey, you guys should really consider the meteorologist report for months from now, but they know things. And so I think, okay, if the animal kingdom, plant kingdom, the sentient beings know instinctually or in some way, and they get to respond, I do wonder about us as human beings, as sentients, and what we're responding to that we're unaware of. But I see a lot of people responding to all kinds of things in their lives, and it is showing up in health issues and illnesses and things that are sometimes out of the blue or strange or don't really make logical sense, and they've been healthy and things are showing up. So I can only sort of conclude at this stage that this is happening on a much bigger scale. And in my practice of 15 years of being in the clinic, I haven't seen it like this before. So even, all the things that are said and all the things I've read over the years and, the different prophecies from indigenous cultures and things like that, I feel resonance with those too. But then I think, okay, well, if I let all that just settle and release from me for a moment, what am I actually observing in my life and in the lives of patients and friends and family? And like you said, like people are really feeling a lot. And it does feel like there's an undercurrent or a rising tide, regardless of if we want it or don't want it in some way, that there is a lot of movement on a bigger scale. And because I get to witness it on the micro level, like in people's organ systems, everything is related, or at least that's what I feel like I know at this moment.
Yes. Yeah. Someone the other day gave me a presentation about these earth changes, and what I added to her view is that these are not actually separate from human affairs. It's not only that the earth changes affect us through, volcanoes and earthquakes and things like that, but we affect them as well. She was representing these scientists, and they say that the earth changes are coming because of a shift in the inner core. And that's maybe related to solar activity. It's happening on other planets in the solar system too. They have a whole thing. And I said, yeah, and also, and that the human heart is affected by the sun. When there's solar flares, it affects people's heart rhythms, especially women.
Yeah.
What is less understood is that the causality goes the other way too. That the sun is paying attention, and this is really, this is going to be out there, all right? So for people who, like things to be scientific, please feel free to interpret this through a poetic lens. but I will state it as objective truth nonetheless, which is that the sun is paying attention to human affairs, and that disturbances in the human heart are correlated and co-create, the causality goes both ways, with disturbances in the sun and disturbances in the heart of the earth. And that therefore we are not the random victims of momentous earth changes that may be coming. But our evolution is, apparently they happen every 12,000 years or so. The theory is due to the motion of the Earth in relation to the galactic plane. I don't know what their whole, I haven't gotten to that part yet, which makes us seem like the hapless victims of it. But actually, human consciousness evolves in a harmonic cycle that is co-resonant with these cosmic cycles. So it's no coincidence that perhaps the peak or phase transition of a geological and solar cycle corresponds to the culmination of a phase of human history that manifests as multiple crises of an existential nature converging on us and forming an initiatory crisis. So and again, like I'm always, a little wary of grandiose narratives that privilege our time as exceptional. But, it sure does seem that a lot of trends in technology and politics and society are accelerating towards some kind of crisis point.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I suspect the physical body, our own genome, our own DNA, has to respond to that in some way as well. And either calling it preparation or shifts or clearing or, things that don't serve us as humans, then it starts to get cleared away. And even when I look at my own life and I look at what's happening in the world and in different areas of major conflict, then I've been reflecting in my own life of where do I have conflict with other people? Mm-hmm. And where am I showing up in a healthy resonance with them and communicating and sharing and being open-hearted? And where am I being closed and not saying the thing or not sharing how I feel authentically? For any number of reasons, because then I think, well, what impact am I going to have in the world if I'm not doing that in my own life and actually having that shift through me and be embodied? So if I am going to share something, that it's coming through those experiential elements, even though it's so uncomfortable. And it felt like last year, in my case, it felt like solar flares was like the narrative of my life, monthly of my heart opening and then my heart closing. And if there could be a metaphorical solar flare of the heart, then that was happening, of either heartbreak or heart opening and expansion, and all of it sort of simultaneously mixed together, and sort of just observing, the drama of that in a micro level and almost just laughing along with it, but deeply feeling grief and sadness at times. And sort of just, in full observation of what is happening in my system and why. And what is this leading me to? Why does it feel like I'm really being squeezed or prepared? And I trust that there's some bigger picture that hasn't unfolded yet.
Yeah. And then there are those moments where, none of these meanings can meet the moment, I'm being prepared for something, or this is purging me of negative programming, or like all of these ways that we make sense of what's happening to us. At some point, if it's a genuine initiation, at some point, none of those meanings will be enough. And you will be crumpled into just having to get through it. And none of your familiar ways of being are enough. And you go through the cycle of despair. That is what makes something initiatory, because that vacating of what you're familiar with, what you know how to do, who you've been, that is the empty space. That creates the empty space for something new to emerge. Mm. And in a way, there's no way you can prepare for it.
Yeah.
It's hard. People are going through it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can say, that doesn't seem a little bit patronizing.
I feel like I probably did that to so many people in the past, unconsciously, because I felt like I had all this wisdom and knowledge medically, and you could do this and you could do that, and trying to bring, or even maybe in some cases force solutions on them that they weren't necessarily even wanting or asking for. But I don't think I was doing it for them. I was probably doing it for me, from my own ego or grandiosity, that I somehow have this special skill set and knowledge to shift things. And it's not that I can't be supportive and helpful, but I have found through advice and mentors and a lot of experiences that sometimes are really challenging, that I spend a lot more time listening now, and like the non-interference energy in a way. And I'm finding it's maybe smoothing things out a little bit more, but a fascinating evolution as well, because of the work that I get to do, where people are asking, and getting out of my mind a little bit more, and just allowing that heart medicine to show up there, and the wisdom coming from maybe not knowing, which is a bit of a Gene Keys quote, but I'm finding that to be more true if I can just let go of that more, and not needing to know why every time, especially in my own case too.
If we were just sitting in a room without cameras and stuff, I would probably not say anything for a good 10 or 15 minutes. I'm not sure if that makes for a good podcast, though. So I feel like I should probably say something.
I do love the stillness element. Maybe I will interrupt the silence a little bit, but we can stay with the energy. What are you noticing in your heart or in your energy with that?
With what?
Just that desire to be quiet. So even though we're in a
Yes.
paradox moment, can you describe either maybe the feeling or the sensation that's underneath that?
It's my relationship to my word, where more and more I'm recognizing it as a sacred power, the power of word, and wanting to use it for what it's for. And not to just, talk out of discomfort with silence. Doesn't mean that it's always for something solemn. But just to put it really simply, I even do this when I'm when I'm on a stage, as you'll may or may not see in October. But I pause a lot, sometimes for a couple seconds, sometimes for as long as half a minute. People start to shift in their chairs, then I'll resume. And people think that it's like some kind of rhetorical device, that it's really deliberate and stuff, but it's actually because at that moment I don't have anything to say. So, I'm not going to insult you by talking at you when I don't have anything to say in that moment. But then usually something comes up to say if I'm on a stage in front of a lot of people. But I bet if it so happens that nothing comes for minutes at a time, that would probably be a really powerful experience.
It would be.
And yeah, I guess maybe it's related to this obsession with making things happen, that we become uncomfortable with silence and stillness and spontaneity because you're not in control.
Mm.
But in fact, I think I've certainly experienced when I release some degree of control and attune to what is mine to say and when is the time to say it, that the words have more power. And it's not that I get more done, but it's that more gets done. And, somebody has to do the stuff that gets done. On the whole, though, an awful lot of human activity is not serving, an awful lot of human doing, an awful lot of human activity is not actually serving human well-being. We could probably be doing a lot less and thriving a lot more. After all, hunter-gatherers and medieval peasants actually worked a lot less than we do today, despite all of our labor-saving devices, all of our conveniences, and all of our comforts, and the enormous amount that you can get done with technology. Do you know how long it used to take to create a corporate presentation? You had to have like a whole department of graphic designers and people cutting and paste, like literally cutting and pasting things in, and you'd send it to the printer, I mean, it was a big task. And now one person can do it in a few hours. Yeah. Or with AI, they can do it in minutes.
Yeah.
Somehow we have not, it takes, a tenth or a hundredth of the human labor, but we have not gotten a tenth or a hundredth as busy somehow.
Yeah.
And we're all in a race. I don't know, like those of you who are in the work world, in the corporate world, it's like everybody's in a race to find new hacks and ways to do things more efficiently and faster. But what's the point if we end up just as busy and just as stressed, if not more stressed, than like the crows that I see flapping around my property? They're like, they have an incredible amount of leisure. They sit around most of the time.
Well, I think about the bears.
The bears, any animals, I like to look at bees and wasps. Mm-hmm. And they spend so much time just kind of crawling all over each other, on the hive. And that was one of the guiding images of there's actually a book that I wrote, published in 2007 called The Ascent of Humanity. That's kind of the generator of The More Beautiful World. It's a very different book. It's 600 pages, it's very dense. But on the cover is a picture of the Tower of Babel.
Mm.
And you know the story. They said, well, let's build a tower all the way to heaven. You know, and in a lot of ways, the whole program of technology that kind of imagines that we will finally solve all of the world's problems. We will banish illness and banish poverty and banish insecurity and maybe even banish death if we can only control every single molecule in existence. Like, why would you die then if you could control every molecule in your body, right? You should be able to have perfect health. And if you can control the telomeres and maybe even artificially, make new cells, why should you not live forever? Like this fantasy, this ambition to conquer the world, to conquer nature, to conquer the process of decay. That effort is like building a tower to heaven, right? And just like that effort, no matter how high we build, no matter how many devices we invent, no matter how detailed medical science is in its knowledge of cell physiology and metabolism, somehow we're not any healthier than we were 50 years ago or 5,000 years ago. Maybe less healthy. In fact, definitely, life expectancy now is even dropping. People are way less healthy than they were a generation or two ago, especially in the advanced countries. So it's like, well, gosh, we've built really high, but the sky is still just as far away as ever. So let's build higher. Maybe we'll reach the sky with the next invention. And at some point, the art I used for the cover was by Peter Bruegel, the elder. And it's a really striking image because you can see it's obvious that the project is doomed. And like the lower levels are starting to collapse. They need repairs, even as they build higher. Very much like our society. Mm-hmm. We're building to these rarefied realms of high technology miracles while basic infrastructure is falling apart. And it is dawning on us, I think, or at least we have the opportunity to accept that the sky is not any closer. And so the remembrance of the leisure and, I won't say ease, but tranquility. That's not the right word either. The word that's the opposite of stress. The feeling of home that animals like to be at home in the world, to have enough time, to be content. When we recognize that in animals and in the people we call less advanced, it reminds us that, actually, we don't have to build a tower to heaven, that the sky starts an inch off the ground, that we're already in it, and that utopia is not going to come through the next invention. Mm-hmm. If it were, we would have already been there. We already have all the technology that we need to live in abundance and peace and ecological sustainability. We have all of the technology. It's not a matter of technology. We're just not using it in that way. Mm-hmm. And so, that more beautiful world, it's not something that's actually that far away, And people who have life-changing experiences recognize that. Near-death experiences, or even any brush with death, that reawakens you to the gift of life and to the pervasiveness of love. and that, oh, it's all okay, actually. And life is a gift, you know? And the world has beauty oozing out of every crack in the worldview that denies it. It's not that far away.
That feeling of home is actually what I notice in some of the events that we've been doing, and participants have shared that with me too. And that is one of my intentions, is either the feeling of belonging, or that there's a space to connect authentically in that way. And it's not technology, and it's just people sitting together, and it feels like we're flowing in the same direction. And it feels inspiring to keep doing it because things are shifting. And then I get to experience that. And it seems like a beautiful wave that continues on. And then when the wave kind of rolls back again, then I get to feel that or shift and change in my own way. And then we gather again and get to see what happens. And I really feel like that's one of the reasons that you were shown to me as a vision, or a mix of intellect and my heart, or a variety of things, that I felt like Charles understands this in some way, and that I can learn from him. And a lot of us can learn from you, even with the stillness or the silence or the uncomfortable, the space in between. And that's often where the magic is, that of course this would be brought in through the morphic resonance field to gather in this way, to do something, and to be in some way. It's a really grassroots, when you're talking about the Tower of Babel, like I feel like we're all going to be on the ground together. And there's something really special about that I feel like we all just get to sit in circle together on the same level, and nobody maybe has any more inherent value than anybody else that's in that space. But the combined nature of that has some level of impact. And we might as well have some fun while we're here.
Yeah. Like I said, it's not all solemn, and fun and humor is if it's not fun, then it's not the real revolution. If there's not an element of fun, I think I said something like that in the book. If there's not at least an element of play in your revolution, then it's not the right revolution.
Yeah. Where is it going in the seriousness? And it feels like a lot of lightness in this space. And I love what you shared there, that we're closer. There's some of these things that I see, and I get to have conversations like this in my daily practice in the clinic way more. Mm-hmm. And it's not on the news, the conversations like this typically, but in that room one-to-one with many people are opening and sharing things that they've never shared before.
I mean, I think it's really good that you're doing those one-on-ones, if you're going to be also doing stuff at larger scale, because it keeps you grounded in reality. People who only do the larger scale stuff, they're basically dealing in abstractions. And it's quite common to drift off into those abstractions, get less and less. You need like a tether to real human beings, especially if you're just doing stuff online.
Yeah.
What
types of...
I mean, I'm almost right now, like, people keep asking me to be on online summits and stuff, and I'm just like, I just feel really grumpy about it.
Yeah.
Like, you're asking people to spend more time looking at a screen. And yeah.
I think for that reason, might be one of the reasons we're not live streaming the event that we're doing. It's only in person.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that's the right path for us at this stage. And maybe we'll do it in the future if I feel inspired to do it. But it didn't feel inspired to do for this one, that,
Right.
you know, we get to relate in a different way. And there's not maybe the outside influence either way.
And maybe like by not having these portals to the outside, you're creating more like a stronger resonance chamber where something more extraordinary can happen because it's kind of cut off. It's separated off from the normalizing influences of the outside world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I also just was feeling like I didn't want more technology as part of the event. Is less.
Yeah.
You know, less is more. And we have a couple screens we use up at the front, but that's pretty much it. And some music. And then we get to just share and be human together and see what wants to unfold.
Beautiful. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we're very much looking forward to having you there with us and all the conversations and the energy in between. And, you know, I know you've got many layers to your life right now. And I'm curious, what are some of the things that is keeping you grounded? Because, you know, I really sense that in your nervous system and in your being, even though you're impacting and involved in sort of world level elements of life. So what are you seeing for yourself that keeps you in that space?
Oh, you know, I play with my 11-year-old pretty much every day. Go swimming in the ocean. You know, it's the material things, the human things that keep me at least somewhat grounded. Nothing extraordinary.
Well, I think that's actually where the beauty is the more experiences I have, the simple things are actually so refreshing in my life right now. And my son and I have been playing catch with a ball.
How old is your son?
13. And my daughter's 15. And he just says, "Dad, do you want to play catch?" And I'm doing my best, no matter what I'm doing in that moment. I say yes.
Yeah.
And we go outside and just throw the ball. And I find that I really look forward to those moments when he asks me if I want to play catch. And I'm finding myself asking him now. And it's just so simple and pure, though. Mm-hmm. And it just makes me feel better, really. Yeah. Well, this might be a good segue to say thanks for playing catch with me today in this way, and, you know, being open to just see where we went in the conversation. And I trust in some way that, yeah, there's that even next step of closeness to the more beautiful world, that it's right there. And I felt such resonance in that way with you as a being and what you're doing, that, yeah, I'm just so honored that we get to be at our new human event together, because it feels like it just dovetails perfectly, and we'll see what happens. So,
yep.
Thank you,
Charles.
Kevin.
I enjoyed our time together, and I also look forward to more.